All right. Thanks everyone for your patience as we got that sorted out. And thank you for joining us here today. So today we will be giving some information about prospective student applicants to the Summer Conference on Applied Data Science. You'll hear us saying SCADS, that's our shorthand for this long name of our conference. It is being hosted by the Laboratory for Analytic Sciences at NC State, and we will talk a little bit more about what LAS is. And of course, we're going to talk a lot more about what SCADS is and how students can get involved. So I'm Dr. Christine Brew. I'm joined by Dr. Matt Schmidt and Dr. Sean Lynch, who will be my co-presenters here today. And you may also see Carter Riley. He is helping us out with kind of triaging the Q&A and making sure everything is running smoothly for you. So we definitely want to use this time to answer your questions. So at any point, please feel free to drop those in the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we'll either get back to you as soon as we can with a typed response, or we might choose to answer it live if we feel like it's something that would be good to kind of talk through and have everyone hear the information. This session is being recorded, so if you need to duck out at any point, we will have it uploaded on our website shortly after, so you should be able to return to this content and review anything or catch up on anything that you missed. And with that, I think we will get started here. Just a brief rundown on what we'll cover. We're going to do that overview of LAS, overview of SCADS and presenting the grand challenge, talking about the 3 internship positions, talking about the student experience at SCADS, and how to apply. All right, so I will hand it over to Matt for our overview of LAS.
Thanks, Christine. So as Christine mentioned, we're going to host the SCADS at the Laboratory for Analytic Sciences on NC State University's campus. So I want to give a little bit of background about LAS because there's a lot of overlap between what LAS does and what we're trying to achieve with SCADS. So LAS was created in 2014, is a partnership between North Carolina State University and the National Security Agency. A lot of what LAS does is it brings together researchers from government, academia, and industry to work on applied research problems, leveraging the latest techniques and the latest research to try and make advancements of interest to the intelligence community. We do both unclassified and classified research, and we work with partners both at NC State and from the academic and industry community at large. Next slide. So with that, kind of what is SCADS? So SCADS is going to be a 8-week event that LAS is hosting in Raleigh, North Carolina. It'll be from June 13th until August 5th of this summer. We're going to host it on NC State's Centennial campus in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the event is really, the goal of the event is really to bring in about 50 or so researchers from government, academia, and industry to work on and really focus on a particular challenge problem of interest to the intelligence community, right? So those 50 researchers, they will include government analysts and government researchers. They will include national lab industry researchers. They will include academic faculty, and most relevant, and why we're having this session, academic students. So for the students who are going to attend, we are going to provide a salary for the time that you're here. We will be providing lodging options for you, as well as travel assistance to and from Raleigh, North Carolina. Right. So our goal is to make progress on this challenge problem. But what exactly is those 8 weeks going to look like? So broadly speaking, right, when you come to SCADS, the first couple of weeks, we're going to try and orient you to what the challenge problem is, right? And Sean will talk a little bit more today about what that problem is, but we'll really get into more of the details during those first couple of weeks of what the problem is, how research might help, what might be some potential approaches, and really sort of introduce you to the problem and your co-participants. The goal is to have the 50 or so participants divide up into smaller groups, and then use the majority of the summer to do rapid iteration on the research questions potentially develop prototypes, get feedback from users and analysts who are there at SCADS to really see if we can make progress on the challenge problem. Toward the end of the summer, then we will focus on bringing in the stakeholders for SCADS and seeing if we can present and demo some of the work that's been going on for the course of the summer, as well as capturing that into a technical report. All right, so that's broadly what we're trying to achieve with SCADS. And this is something that ideally this will be the first of an annual event that we host at LAS. But to kind of get into a little bit more about what we're going to focus on this particular summer, I'm going to turn it over to Sean Lynch, who will talk more about the challenge problem for SCADS in 2022. Sean?
Thanks, Matt. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So as Matt alluded to, we've kind of set this grand challenge, and the first point I want to make about this is not a one-year goal, right? This is it would be very impressive if we could achieve something like this in 1 year, but we don't really have that expectation. This is more of like a 5 to 10 year goal, and as Matt said, this is meant to be an annual event. So we hope to kind of get a good start on this. In the early years, we're thinking, there's going to be a lot of effort on really kind of feeling out different paths of research and different approaches to this. And in later years, we're probably going to have good paths identified, and it will be more kind of focused on those specific ones. But in the early years, like I said, none of us really know how to achieve this challenge. So there's going to be a bit of brainstorming and a bit of kind of guessing and checking and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So what are we talking about here? So generate tailored daily reports for knowledge workers that capture information relevant to their individual objectives and interests. So what does this all mean? Well, I won't read this whole paragraph to you. You can read it yourselves, of course. But in general terms, we're trying to create an algorithm that can generate a short report, maybe something like a page in length or so. And this report would be tailored to an individual user's objectives and interests. So you might be a user, I might be a user, the president might be a user, right? Anybody could really be a user of this capability, and it's going to provide information that is tailored to the user, right? So it's not, your report is going to be different than my report, etc. And so how do we do that, right? Well, we have to model what it is that the user cares about. We have to develop capabilities that can go and find information that is relevant to those objectives and interests that the user has. And we need to figure out some way to combine that information into a relatively consumable and short report that is not a burden on the user to read or to view and consume. So this is all very difficult goals, but it's also holds a lot of promise, right? And so as we mentioned here, this is kind of a process that takes place every day in the intelligence community for the president every day, right? There's a report that the president reads every morning that summarizes this kind of the intelligence information that he needs to know. And so the idea here is that can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to produce something like this for all of us every day. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I could spend hours talking about this, but I certainly will not. We'll try to be very brief here. Just wanted to point out a few of the technologies that we expect will be focus areas in conducting our research towards this grand challenge this summer and those that follow. So as you can see here, at the top of this list is knowledge graphs. If you're not familiar with knowledge graphs, these are kind of a fancy database, but it structures the information in a way that allows you to ask questions of the data that would be difficult to ask of a typical kind of relational database. You've all used these, of course. You may not know you've used them, but you definitely have, right? Whenever you Google something, if you Google, for instance, what is the capital of North Carolina, Google, at the top of their search results, it'll talk about Raleigh, right? Well, the technology behind that capability is, of course, a knowledge graph, right? Google has built some massive knowledge graph that has this various information in it, and they've also built a capability to convert your human language queries into kind of graph queries. And if it finds a good response, it'll present it to you. So these are really powerful tools, and we see them as being very useful for this grand challenge, in the sense of, well, once we've gathered information that is probably of interest to a user, we'd like to have an algorithm find information within that knowledge graph to present to the user, right? So, okay, and then the next bullet, abstract and extractive text summarization. This is obviously a very useful technology. The abstract in particular is kind of a newer technology. That's where you're not just taking a long document and extracting certain parts of it that you think are most relevant, but you're actually generating a new narrative that is shorter and summarizes the main points of say, a text document. So again, this is what separates this grand challenge from a typical, say, recommender algorithm like we have in the next bullet, right? We're not just going to recommend, that the user read a big pile of documents, right? We're going to try to actually summarize those documents for the reader, because again, one of the goals is to keep this TLDR kind of short in length. Continual learning and auto ML for information retrieval. These are relatively interesting technologies. This is the idea that we can learn every day how we did and use that to do better the next day, essentially. So we can take information back from the learner and use it to improve our process going forward. And capitalizing and analyzing user activity, as I mentioned before, we obviously need to model the user to understand their objectives and interests. So, we need some information about what it is they're doing to try to build that model. So how do you do that, right? Do we build some kind of instrumentation tools on their laptops, or to kind of monitor what they're doing, or do we ask them directly? Do we do some kind of combination of these things, right? There's a lot of research into this area, and we think that this is certainly well in line with what we're trying to do for this grand challenge. And presentation, of course, is the last thing I mentioned. So there's once we have a big pile of information that we want to present to a user, well, how do we do that in an effective manner, right? How do we actually, what does this report look like? Does it have graphs and charts in it? Is it just narrative? There's a lot of options here. And so that is a research topic unto itself. And the last point here, right, is that this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some kind of high points, some technologies that are sure to play a role in this. But if you've got your own thoughts about how we might go on about achieving this grand challenge, SCADS is going to offer that opportunity to talk about those ideas with 49 other people, right, and to investigate them. And we think it's going to be a great learning experience for everyone involved. And we really hope that that we also offer an environment that is kind of conducive to ideation and brainstorming. And that is an explicit goal of SCADS as well, is to offer a learning experience for everyone involved. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Christine.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sean, for giving us that context and overview. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the internship positions. If you've been on our website, you have probably seen these. If you haven't been on our website, please go take a look. I've got the link down there at the bottom. It is ncsu-las.org/2020-SCADS. So please go take a look at that. That's where we have the full position descriptions for each of these that are going to give you a lot of detail and that really rich context for who we're looking for. But since this question already came through in the chat, I definitely want to address it now. We are recruiting talented graduate students and exceptional undergraduates. So if you're an undergraduate who is already getting started on your master's coursework, or you're already engaging in research, send us your materials. We will take a look at them and see if it would be a good fit. And we have 3 areas that we are recruiting students for. In total, we expect to hire about 6 to 12 students. That varies a little bit just based on budgets and how a few things sort out there. But we're going to take the next chunk of time here to just talk through each of these positions individually and give you a little more detail about who we're looking for. So starting with the defense and intelligence internship position, I've listed some qualities here that might make for a really great applicant, but really we are looking for the folks who want to use this as a career development opportunity, who know that they have an interest in working with the IC or with the DoD and want to kind of strengthen their networks and build up their understanding of what common IC DoD type problems are. Of course, due to the focus that you just heard from Sean, people who are interested in tools or technology to improve the performance of analysts are going to have the most enriching experience here. So if that is something that you feel passionately about and can see yourself doing as a career, again, send us your application materials. We'd love to see what you have to offer. People who would excel in this area can be great interdisciplinary communication folks. We're going to put you in with a team of data scientists, academics, government, and you should feel comfortable being able to talk to multiple priorities and kind of understand different angles on the problem from each of those groups. If you have experience in AI, ML, or human machine teams, or even user experience or the data science side of it, that would be helpful, but it's not a requirement for this position. We're more interested in how you can dive into this environment, get some mentoring on these topics, and then generate good ideas to help us advance. So the next position is what we're calling the user experience, mixed methods, and social network analysis intern. And this is really speaking to the parts of the problem that Sean was describing in terms of modeling the user and also delivering a personalized product. So if you have experience in running human subjects research, if you have hands-on experience in developing prototype applications and applying user experience principles to those. If you have done surveys or focus groups or other engagement with potential end users of technology, we want you to come in and we want you to work on those kinds of things with us. This is really to ensure that the data science side is also being presented back in a way that is congruent with what the user needs. So this could also expand out to include things like looking at workflows and considering how the information that we are providing can be smoothly incorporated into someone's day-to-day workflow. And then the last kind of 2 bullet points here are talking about modeling of networks of communication and knowledge transfer and mapping user needs and priorities. Again, we really want to understand the space in which people are working and how they are using the technology that we're developing. So that could come in terms of analyzing usability metrics, putting forth surveys, conducting experiments. If you are good at doing those kinds of things or interested in doing more research on those, we would love to talk with you. And I'll hand it to Matt for this one.
Thanks, Christine. So the third type of internship position we're looking for is really folks with an experience with machine learning, knowledge management, and software engineering applications and skills. So as Sean mentioned, a lot of the interest in the challenge problem is the fact that the opportunity presented by some of the advances in machine learning may allow us to scale some of the production of the tailored daily report to the number of users that we have in mind. So someone with experience, not just knowledge of machine learning concepts, but really sort of applying those to build out operational tools is definitely someone would be interested in talking to. A familiarity with natural language processing techniques would be very useful for all the things that Sean mentioned related to text summarization and summary extraction, things like that. A familiarity with foundational models in NLP. So some of the advances and foundational models that have come out in recent years, like BERT and GPT-3, would be a great thing to have. The tailored component of this, right, would benefit from people with experience in building recommendation systems and looking at sort of, tailoring those types of recommendations. The knowledge management component of this really looks into a couple different things, but knowledge graphs is something that we think is going to be a big component of the research this summer. So people who have experience with ontologies and constructing knowledge graphs from free text and multi-source, multimodal data sources is something that would be extremely relevant to what we're trying to achieve in SCADS. As far as software engineering skills, we are wanting to prototype a lot of the ideas that would be coming out of SCADS. So people with a familiarity and experience with deep learning softwares and architectures, people who can implement some of the machine learning models that may be proposed, people who can work with the data science, machine learning, and scientific computing libraries would really kind of help speed up some of the iteration that we're looking for within SCADS. And then as far as prototyping, people with experience building and implementing web applications and service APIs can sort of help us get over the hump on actually communicating what the ideas are for approaches to the problem. So if any of those sound like you, obviously we would be very interested in talking with you. If you think it might, go ahead and send us your information, and we'll help talk through that. If we want to go to the next slide.
And Matt, I believe this is yours too.
Yeah. So again, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning about what exactly would the 8 weeks look like. So yes, you'll be doing kind of the introduction and group formation at the beginning of the summer, with a large part of the summer being the actual research and development work, and then kind of the latter part of the summer, writing up your report, writing up your results, presenting them to stakeholders, things like that. So that's kind of the broad outline of what the summer looks like. As far as the environment that you'd be working, our goal is to make this a very collaborative environment, something where you feel entirely comfortable sharing, say, half-baked ideas, trying to get feedback, trying to iterate quickly to see if we can get to a solution. So we're going to be bringing in a lot of other students, a lot of researchers from academia, industry, and government, users who could potentially benefit from this, all of which to kind of help benefit and give feedback on different people's ideas and things like that. We do want you to be working on problems that are interesting to you. So whether you already are doing research in this area, or it's something that you would like to do more research in, we do want you to be working on problems that you find interesting, right? This is going to be something that we rely on you to kind of move forward and come up with that next idea. And finally, we are going to try and bring in guest speakers and bring in lecturers to talk about topics that maybe you hadn't been as familiar about, but are definitely relevant to the problem at hand. And some of those lectures and presentations may be by the participants themselves, right? There's a lot of expertise we're going to be bringing into this environment, and the goal is to share that so that we can build on each other's ideas. As far as the living environment, right, you will be on North Carolina State University's campus, right? So it will be a campus environment. There are the standard amenities, gym access, coffee shops, restaurants, there's a library on Centennial campus, the Hunt Library, that's one of the state-of-the-art libraries in the nation, and you'll have access to all of those things just as you would as living on a college campus in the summer. As I mentioned, we're also in Raleigh, North Carolina, so very quick drive to downtown Raleigh, get all of the restaurants and museums and things that you're interested in down there. There's minor league baseball, things to do in the summer. So there's a lot of stuff outside of just the SCADS working environment that you can partake in if you're in Raleigh for the summer. You will be in Raleigh, North Carolina for the summer. It will be hot. I will go ahead and tell you that. But it still should be an enjoyable experience. And going on to the next question or next slide.
Yep. All right. So this one's back to me. Before I go through this, I did want to highlight one question that we had come in, which was about clearance requirements. The entirety of the conference will be unclassified, so you are not expected to have a security clearance in order to apply for one of these student positions. So yeah, let's talk about how to apply. First, I would definitely encourage everyone coming out of this to take a look at our website. We've given a quick overview of the problem and the different internship positions, but you can find much more detailed descriptions on our website. So take a look at those and start seeing, how your experience or your interests kind of line up with what you're reading about what we're looking for this summer. After you've done that, get your materials ready. We are asking for contact information for 2 to 3 references, a resume or CV, and a cover letter. If you can tailor your cover letter a little bit to what you've read and how you see yourself fitting, that's helpful for us because we can just get a better sense of who you are as an applicant. And then step 3 is to upload your materials. We are collecting all of the applications via a Google form that once again is linked on our website. So if you're interested in applying, you can go to our website and see that Google form. And it just asks for the information that I've listed here. So if you have any issues with that process or anything along the way, you can email us at scads-apply@ncsu.edu, and we will help you out as best we can. Our priority deadline for applications is 1 week from today, midnight next Friday, February 18th. So be sure to get your materials in before then if you're interested. We're going to start reviewing things pretty quickly, and we will send out our initial batch of interview offers by February 25th. If you have a crazy week coming up or you're just not able to get to submitting your materials in the next week, the application will remain open until March 4th. And if we have any spots remaining after that initial batch of interviews, we'll be still taking a look at the different applications that have come in, and we will review those and extend additional interview offers as space permits. So with that, we will go into our question and answer period. And I see that one more has come through, so I'm going to take a look at that one. And Matt, would you, someone has answered it, but it was a question about if we live in Raleigh, will we be to move onto campus?
Yeah, so what I just answered in the text Q&A was, if you are already local and can make the daily commute to Centennial campus, you don't have to move onto campus if you don't want to. The option will be there if, say, your parents are local and you want to get away from your parents for the summer, that's fine. We'll have a place for you, but it's not a requirement. We are going to ask, though, that you are able to be working on campus for the summer, right? So being able to come in for the day, where it's not going to be a virtual environment.
Yeah, so while we hang out and see if any more responses come in, I'll tell you about this picture that I have up on the screen right now. So the body of water is Lake Raleigh, which is a part of NC State's campus. And then the building kind of right in the middle is one of our research spaces. To the right of that, the big building is Hunt Library. So you can kind of just see the view of Centennial campus looking out over the lake.
And so there's just another question here about whether or not this internship is open to international students. And the answer there is yes, we are open to international students. There's a process that you'd have to go through if you were selected, but it's something we work with every day at LAS. We work with lots of international students as part of LAS's mission, and that's something that would just kind of roll over into this. Also asked if this would be considered a cross enrollment, since it'd be mentioned earlier that you'd be enrolled at NC State. It would not. It would be considered an internship at NC State, and so the translation between internship and hours doesn't really work for what we're trying to do in SCADS. So it would be best considered as a separate internship from your academic career.
Sean, would you be willing to talk to the longer question that came in?
Yeah, sure. So it looks like there's 3 questions about the tailored daily reports. First being, is there any specific domains or major user behaviors we're going to focus on for the daily reports? Okay, so the short answer is kind of no. So there's different types of information that we're interested in all of them, basically. That doesn't mean we'll have data sets prepared and ready to go that kind of represent every type of information that we're interested in. But we will definitely have some. So I guess I'm going to kind of answer the first 2 questions together. So like the second question being, what are the data sources we can leverage to generate the daily report? So we are working as we speak to prepare several data sets that will be representative of the kind of pool of data that the TDR will draw from. So one example of that would be like a set of news articles, for instance. So we have a data set right now we're looking at that consists of many news articles, along with some level of user activity data. So for instance, user A read articles X, Y, and Z at these dates and times, right? So we have that information for a large set of users over a large set of news articles, right? So that is one example of a data set that will be available for the tailored daily report algorithm to learn from and to try to generate for instance, to try to generate an abstract summary of the news articles that it thinks are of interest to a particular user, for instance. But there are other data sets we're looking at as well. It's not just textual data, such as news articles. We're also interested in data that may be in the form of images, or it may be videos of images, right? It may be, could even be audio data. So we have several sets of data that we're looking to have prepared for the conference. But all that said, they're part of your work in the conference could be to prepare additional data sets or to do additional data set preparation for a specific task. So it's not truly limited to what we're going to have prepared for you in advance. And then the last question, it looks like abstract summarization. What languages are we going to focus on? So we're going to be focusing on English for sure. However, if you really want to focus on a different language, that is totally fine too. That is of interest to us, to be able to have this capability work for languages other than English, and even the cross-lingual kind of thing. So if you had like, let's say you had documents that were in, some other language other than English, could we generate an abstract summarization in English? That would be of interest as well. So we're open to all of those types of research. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Sean. So next question we had was a question about mentorship and sort of how mentorship for students would be provided during the event. And I'll say the way that we were envisioning that is part of the reason we are kind of trying to limit this to between 6 to 12 students is we would like each student to get paired up with at least one faculty member or one senior researcher at the event. And so part of the first week or two is going to be about finding that mentor and finding the researcher who can kind of work closely with a student and direct some of the research. But we are going to ask, and we are going to look for applicants that have some of the skills at sort of being proactive and finding that mentor. There are going to be lots of people who could potentially mentor you at the workshop, and part of your role will be to find the one that you want to work with. So it's going to be a little bit on the student, but it's also going to be something that we are going to keep an eye on and make sure we don't have students kind of out there left to their own devices because they never got hooked up with anybody working in their area. And then the next question was whether there was going to be a cap on the number of applicants considered. There's no cap on the number of applicants. Christine laid out the time deadlines, right? So we'll do a consideration of the applicants who come in by February 18th, and then we'll kind of do rolling consideration up until March 4th, or we have made offers to enough people to fill out the cohort of students. So there's no cap on the number of applicants, and we will consider every application that comes in by February 18th. And then after that, it will depend a little bit on how the offers go.
So Matt, it's possible that Connor meant, maybe they're curious about how many people will be accepted.
Oh, okay. So we're not entirely sure, right? This is the first year that we've done SCADS. We would really like, we think it would be great if we had, 30 or so applicants for the positions, but we're going to measure more on the number of students that we can find that we think would be really good candidates for SCADS. And so we're not 100% sure about how many we should expect, but like I said, we are expecting to invite 6 to 12 students in the end.
All right, we seem to have answered all the questions that came in through chat, but Samson, I see that you have your hand raised, so I'm gonna click the button that allows you to unmute in case you wanted to follow up on any of the questions you had asked or answers that Sean had given. Okay, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Christy. I think I already, Sean already answered my questions through the bot.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the 3 questions that I would ask. Thank you.
All right. So I think we will plan on hanging on here for probably the next 5 minutes, just in case anyone thinks of anything. But otherwise, if you don't have any further questions, we will consider the webinar concluded. Of course, you can follow up with us at our email address, scads-apply@ncsu.edu. But if you want to hang out and send us a question, we will be here until roughly 2:50. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Matt, would you like to speak to the question that just came in from Lee?
Yeah. So are research findings being kept in-house within the group session participants, or will they be made available for paper submission? So the technical report that would be produced, that would initially be just for internal production, because, well, we don't think anything classified would be in there. It's unclear what the sensitivities would be, and they would have to go through a review process. If there are research papers that come out of this in addition to the technical report, right? So interesting research question comes up, or particular method gets developed that we'd like, or you'd like to publish a research paper on, that's something that we would, we have a review process set up for research papers that come out of this that's different than the technical report. So those can be published. They just have to go through a real short review process just to make sure and get the official stamp of approval that nothing sensitive is in there. And then they can be published and made available to the public. That review process typically takes a day or two and shouldn't be a huge amount of overhead if that's something you would want to publish on after SCADS.